In a crowded restaurant where smiles were expected and respect was assumed, one sudden act shattered the illusion of safety. A black woman, simply waiting to be served, became the target of a moment so humiliating and violent that the entire room froze. No warning, no explanation, just power used without mercy. What no one noticed was the quiet confidence she carried, and the truth she didn't rush to reveal. Because the hand that struck her had no idea what consequences were already set in motion. And when the truth finally surfaced, everything changed. But was justice really served in the end? She lived a quiet, disciplined life, built on routine and dignity. Each morning began the same way: early hours, careful preparation, and a deep sense of responsibility toward the people she loved. As a black woman who had learned to navigate the world cautiously, she carried herself with calm confidence, aware that respect was not always given freely. She worked hard, kept her circle small, and avoided conflict whenever possible. To most strangers, she appeared ordinary, unremarkable, easy to overlook. That day was supposed to be no different. She had stepped into the restaurant only to take a short break from her schedule, expecting nothing more than a simple meal and a moment of peace. The place was busy, filled with laughter, clinking dishes, and the soft hum of everyday life moving forward. It felt safe, familiar, like a space where nothing could go wrong. But beneath the surface, tension lingered, unseen and unspoken. Subtle glances followed her movements. Small delays stretched longer than they should have. The kind of discomfort that couldn't be proven, only felt. She noticed it, as she always did, but chose silence over confrontation. Years of experience had taught her that reacting too quickly often made things worse. What no one in that restaurant understood was that her life extended far beyond what they could see. Beyond the assumptions made about her presence, beyond the way she was judged in a single glance. There were connections, history, and strength surrounding her, things she never needed to announce. As she waited, patient and composed, the air around her shifted. Something was about to break. A moment was approaching that would turn an ordinary afternoon into a story no one there would ever forget. And when it happened, it would expose more than just prejudice. It would reveal how dangerous underestimating someone could be. What began as discomfort soon turned into something heavier, something impossible to ignore. Minutes passed, then more, and still she remained unseen. Others who arrived after her were acknowledged, served, and welcomed with polite gestures that never reached her side of the room. Plates moved past her table. Smiles were offered elsewhere. Each small act felt deliberate, stacking silently on top of one another. She stayed seated, posture steady, expression controlled. Years of quiet endurance had taught her that reacting too soon could invite ridicule instead of resolution. Still, the weight of the moment pressed harder with every passing second. Eyes drifted toward her and away just as quickly. The atmosphere around her seat felt colder, sharper, as if her presence itself had become an inconvenience. Then it happened. The tension snapped without warning. A sudden movement, a burst of anger disguised as authority. The kind of action that doesn't come from misunderstanding, but from entitlement. In one humiliating instant, she was no longer just waiting for service. She was being punished for daring to exist in that space. The impact was loud enough to silence the room, yet somehow quiet enough that no one rushed to defend her. Shock rippled through her body before pain followed. Not just physical, but something deeper. The familiar sting of being reminded where the world believed she belonged. Her heart pounded, not from fear alone, but from disbelief that something so blatant could still happen in public, in front of so many witnesses. Around her, People froze. Some looked away. Others stared, but remained rooted in place. No one intervened. No one questioned what they had just seen. The injustice hung in the air, thick and suffocating, as if the room itself had decided to stay neutral. She rose slowly, refusing to let the moment break her. Her hands trembled, but her gaze stayed level. Inside, emotions collided. Anger, humiliation, restraint, all fighting for control. She could feel every assumption being made about her in that instant, that she was powerless, that she would accept it, that there would be no consequences. What they didn't know was how carefully she had learned to stay calm when provoked, how silence, when chosen deliberately, could be far more dangerous than shouting. She didn't lash out. She didn't plead. She simply steadied herself, aware that the story unfolding was no longer just about her. It was about what came next. The staff scrambled, not to apologize, but to manage the situation. Attention shifted toward damage control rather than accountability. The aggressor stood firm, convinced nothing serious would follow. After all, this kind of behavior had likely gone unchallenged before. But outside that restaurant, forces were already moving. Unseen connections, quiet loyalty. A man who did not tolerate disrespect, especially toward the woman he loved. Someone whose influence was never advertised, whose power was felt only when lines were crossed. As the room slowly returned to its shallow rhythm, one truth remained hidden beneath the surface. This incident was far from over. What felt like the end of her humiliation was only the beginning of a reckoning that would soon reach far beyond those restaurant walls. And when it did, no one involved would be able to pretend they hadn't seen it coming. The moment she stepped outside, the weight she had been holding finally pressed down on her chest. The noise of the restaurant faded behind her, replaced by a ringing silence that made everything feel unreal. Her reflection in the glass caught her eye, composed on the outside, shaken beneath the surface. What had happened wasn't just an insult. It was a reminder of how quickly dignity could be stripped away, how easily cruelty could hide behind authority. Inside, the staff scrambled to restore order, convincing themselves the incident was contained. They believed the worst had passed. They were wrong. Within hours, the truth reached someone who never ignored injustice, especially when it touched his family. The man she trusted most didn't respond with rage or chaos. He responded with certainty, the kind that comes from knowing exactly how power works and how quickly it can change hands. By the time the restaurant realized attention had turned toward them, it was too late. Scrutiny arrived from every direction. Management was confronted with undeniable evidence. Witnesses who once stayed silent suddenly remembered every detail. Security footage no one expected to be reviewed became impossible to dismiss. The same space that had felt so hostile now felt exposed. The woman who had been struck was called back, not as a troublemaker, not as a problem, but as the center of a reckoning. The room that once ignored her presence now revolved around it. Faces that had looked away earlier could no longer avoid the truth. What was dismissed as a minor incident was revealed for what it truly was, a clear act of racial abuse. And then the realization spread, quiet at first, then undeniable. This wasn't just any complaint. This wasn't a story that would fade by morning. The man standing behind her was not someone to be brushed aside or delayed with empty apologies. His influence reached places no one in that room had anticipated. Fear replaced arrogance. Confidence collapsed into regret. The power dynamic shifted completely, leaving one question hanging heavily in the air. When consequences finally arrive, who truly pays the price? The days that followed changed more than just one outcome. They reshaped how everyone involved understood accountability. The restaurant could no longer hide behind silence or excuses. Consequences arrived swiftly, not as an act of revenge, but as a response to a line that should never have been crossed. Policies were reviewed, responsibility was enforced, and a space that once felt unsafe was forced to confront its own reflection. For her, healing did not come from watching others fall. It came from reclaiming the dignity that had been challenged. She refused to let the incident define her as a victim. Instead, it became a reminder of her strength, of the discipline it took to stand firm when humiliation tried to break her. She returned to her life not unchanged, but more aware. Aware that silence may feel safer, but truth carries power when it finally speaks. What happened to her was not an isolated moment. It was a mirror of a reality many face quietly, every day. Disrespect that hides in plain sight. Prejudice disguised as authority, and a system that often relies on people staying silent to survive. This story matters because it exposes how quickly injustice can unfold, and how rarely it is challenged unless someone is willing or able to push back. But the most uncomfortable truth is this: justice should never depend on who someone knows or the influence behind them. No one should need protection to be treated with basic human respect. The real question is how many similar moments go unanswered because no one steps in, no one speaks up, and no one is watching. So when you see injustice, whether it's loud or subtle, what do you choose to do? Look away or stand firm? Because change doesn't begin with power. It begins with awareness. And sometimes, the smallest moments reveal exactly how much work still needs to be done.